So what happens after that? Like in terms of, you're like, my career's over. Is it time? Are you thinking, okay, now it's time to worry about maybe some things that are affecting me, or like, what was that process like?
That's 2016 and 17. No, I'm living in Arizona with my girlfriend.
Yeah.
Just trying to figure out life.
Yeah.
Going through emotions.
Yeah.
Still dealing with those things from that incident. 17, 18, 19. What was COVID? What year was COVID? When did COVID start?
2020,
Yeah,
March.
2020.
2020, getting into COVID.
Yeah.
April 2020, I went to the treatment facility. Went back to the treatment facility I went to before
Okay.
in 2016.
Were you?
Second time around.
Yeah.
Whole different perspective, different mind.
You just went there yourself?
No, COVID brought me down. So that's when I found out about my depression and anxiety. Just going through COVID.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Just being at home, I'm like, this doesn't, I don't feel right.
Yeah.
So I checked myself into the facility.
Yeah.
COVID woke that up in a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people that were just functional enough to not pay attention.
Me.
Right?
I wonder how much of that was,
I was
like,
great at that.
I wonder how much of that was like you're distracted. You're able to distract yourself, right? You can go out, you can do
You can go to the club.
I can cope, I can continue coping. And then when all that is shut down, then you have to sit there with your thoughts, right? And sit there and think about yourself,
days.
right? For days,
Yeah.
That
Whole quarantine.
Yeah. So then you go and then you get this diagnosis of you said depression, major depressive disorder, and social anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then what are some kind of things that you've done since then to, help with that?
So while I was in, I just want to say this. So while I was in the treatment facility, I was still working to get my degree. So I left the treatment facility. I got my college degree. So I finished that. So then I had my routine. I started my journey, I guess. So
Right.
I got my therapist. I got my psychologist in Arizona, and I just started working on myself. Just started figuring out
What you need to do.
Yeah.
I want to get your take on this, where sort of this one incident, and you don't have, like, prior to that one incident, you don't have any history of nothing, right?
No.
Like, you don't have social anxiety, right? You don't have any depression, no sort of thoughts like that.
It's just crazy to hear you say that, because at the time when I first found out about this, I told my parents about it, because I asked the same questions. Like, my therapist even told me, like, sometimes there's, I guess, a line, like, runs in your family kind of thing, or it may be passed on from you. Like, mom, like, that kind of thing. She was like, no. So I just started to do the background work and see, is it really stemming for that, or is it stemming from my my childhood, I guess, upbringing.
Yeah, and there was nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah,
No.
and then it's this one incident, and then just this entire, I think it's an unfortunate incident, right? Because it's not like he was sort of like predisposed to this happening. He was like mid-20s, right?
Midlife crisis.
Yeah.
Went through a real midlife crisis.
Well, I think so. Here's how so in our clinic at Brain Sport, we see a lot of people who I would say half the people we see in our concussion clinic, right, have prolonged symptoms, have some sort of predisposition, something before that gets activated and turned up, right? And other people don't. And I've struggled how to explain in the present day why is someone experiencing this now? Like, what happens? And the best way I've come up with it is the event in our concussion clinic. It's a concussion, car accident, football injury, whatever it is. In this case, right, the NFC Championship game. In somebody else's case, a breakup, whatever it may be. And especially for young folk, I think in the early to mid 20s, especially if you come from a relatively healthy background, right? It was stressed, but maybe not super stressed, right? Many times, this is the first experience that an individual has with true vulnerability.
Yeah.
Right? Is it midlife crisis, like a quarter life crisis, like, holy shit, life's real.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't, like, before this, I might have not have known that. Rationally, I might have known it, but emotionally, I didn't know it. And now I've experienced the true vulnerability of life. And in this case, it's like my career. Like, it's a game, but it's not. It's a life. It's a career. It's an identity, right? So to have that question for the first time ever, that's some heavy.
Yeah.
Right? And when you describe major depressive disorder and social anxiety, like, I tell my patients, that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
when you go through something like that rocks you to your core, that exposes a vulnerability that you didn't about life that you didn't know existed, you would be a robot to not get the feels.
Yeah.
Like you should get the feels. Now, unfortunately, right, and I'm hoping through like podcasts like this, right, other people realize that the sooner we realize we're in it, the easier it is to come out, right?
Exactly.
You don't do more knee damage, right?
Yeah.
You don't mess the ACL up, and now you've messed the MCL up and all the cartilage because you've been running on it for years and years, and now you need a whole knee replacement, right? That's heavy work. So the sooner we realize it, then we can start to make progress on it. Because I would have social anxiety too.
Right.
If walking through the airport, they're like, "Oh, you're the guy who drives the ball."
dude.
I wouldn't want to be around people, right? It makes sense.
You know, one thing 2 points that I take away from it is the contribution of social media, right, to the acceleration or the worsening of that process, and then B, you know, if we know that these people are particularly at risk for something like this happening, right, should there be some sort of, you know, being taught sort of mechanisms to be able to cope with that? You know what I mean?
I think the biggest challenge, and Brandon, you tell me, man.
Yeah.
You have to be able to go, yeah, I'm willing to look at that, right? They sent you to a treatment center, and that was probably the wrong place, right? But at the time, right, you walk through into motions, right? Let me get back on the field. Let me get back on the field.
Yeah.
So that's the hardest part about mental health treatment.
It is.
Like,
It is.
you know when your MCL is messed up because they show you, or ACL, they show you a picture of it. And you're like, okay, I got to fix that.
Yeah.
Right? We don't have that.
Yeah.
For anxiety or depression or, you know, stress. We don't have that.
Right.
So it's very hard for anybody, us included, to be able to look in the mirror and go, something's not right. Yeah, I'll take this help, even if it's like right at the door waiting for us.
Yeah.
Right? Even if a team shoves a therapist in your face and goes, this guy's the best thing since sliced bread, you're going, but I don't need that guy.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's really hard to
is.
overcome. That's the hardest part about my profession.
I think that's one of the biggest things I struggle with. Sort of a denial thing. Sort of like knowing something's wrong, but not taking the initiative to fix it, kind of. So just thinking I'm just this macho man that I can handle it. Comes to find out I couldn't. So I say the biggest thing that I've noticed, I wouldn't have went to the treatment facility if my girlfriend didn't tell me all these things about myself that I wasn't seeing. You know, because when you're in that dark moment, you don't really see yourself as what you're going through, and it's kind of hard to put the words to what you're feeling.
Yeah.
So, or just what you're going through.
Yeah.
Like I'll just be angry. I don't know I'm angry. I'll just lash out.
You don't know why you're angry.
I don't know why,
Right.
but you know.
I was looking at this a neuropsychology study, especially in retired NFL football players, and they interviewed 35 football players as well as their family members. And one of the biggest actual barriers to them seeking mental health was just exactly what you're talking about, which is sort of that initiative and that hesitation surrounding, well, what is that going to entail? You know what I mean? Like, what is that going to involve?
Yeah.
Right. Which I thought, you know, was actually really, really interesting.
Yeah.
You know, and that tangible thing, right? If he has that mindset of like, okay, my ACL is torn, let's get it fixed. Let's
And
let's
that ego,
rehab. Let's
and
rehab.
put your ego in there.
Right, exactly. And then that means that, you know, that's potentially beneficial, right? If you can, you know, if he's willing to participate in rehab for the ACL and he can get back sooner, right? If he's willing to put in the work. But that's a little bit different when it comes to mental health issues.
Yeah.
Right.
I tell my athletes that, you know, the mental health treatment, and nobody does preventative mental health treatment. It's not a thing, right? But we would love
That's the first thing I ask my.
we would love people to do it, but people don't do it.
Yeah.
Right. So I try to make the analogy to my patients about the physical analogy, right? Why do you do strength and conditioning training in the off season? Right.
To prevent injuries.
To prevent, maybe not prevent, but make it less likely to
right,
happen,
right.
right? Make it less likely to happen.
Yeah.
To prime your body for the grueling physical nature of the season, now 18-game season, or whatever it is, right? And so mentally, right, why would we wait until we are a shell of ourselves to do anything about it, right? So theoretically, in a perfect world, right, we would have like mental training as part of strength and conditioning training, like getting prepped for the stressors, like acknowledging our weaknesses. Oh, you know, my left side is not as strong as my right side. Now I got to do more core exercises, whatever it is, right? Same mentally. And that way, inevitably, when there is a stressful experience, because you don't play professional sports or live a life without vulnerability, without going through bad shit, right? You're more apt to cope with it and or now you've established a relationship with the mental health field through the initial phases where you're more likely to get assistance
That's a
earlier
great
on.
point.
So
That's an
that would
excellent
be
point.
a pretty picture,
That's a
right?
great point.
It's not reality.
No, it's not.
It's not how it works, right? I'm well aware of that, right?
Yeah.
This is the problem in my profession. It's tough.
Yeah,
It
that's
is.
difficult. I would say that I know in May of 2019, the NFLPA and the NFL got together and they're doing a comprehensive mental health and wellness initiative that basically mandates every team to have a mental health clinician on staff to be able to. But that was 2019,
Okay.
right? A little bit late for you, but yeah. And then I also wanna hit on the masculine thing, right? Like, okay, all right. So I think generally across the board, right, and maybe the culture's shifting, but generally across the board, right, with men, it's a lot more difficult to come forward and acknowledge their mental health issues, right?
For sure.
But then you take that sect of men, right, and NFL players, right, that you've been conditioned your entire life to be tough, to be this kind of person, right, which benefits you on the football field, and for you to build psychological resilience. Right, to be able to work harder to get where you need to go, right? But then at the same time, you're kind of asking these people to then, be in touch with their feelings and kind of their mental health, so that they would be willing to come forward and acknowledge that.
Yeah,
it's
sounds
very
like an
interesting
oxymoron.
thing. Right, it does.
Right?
Yeah,
it is, man. I use a lot of analogies, as you can tell.
Yeah, I like them.
There's a dream I have one day of teaching a class with Will Ferrell on this. But I talk to my high performance athletes, and not just athletes, but a lot of high performance individuals that are at the peak of their professions and their careers. I have them go watch. You ever seen Ricky Bobby, The Battle of Talladega Nights with Will Ferrell?
Mm-hmm.
Right. It is the epitome. It's a psychology movie, right? So Will Ferrell has a cognitive distortion, as we call it, an all or nothing thinking, black or white thinking. If I'm not first, I'm last.
Yeah.
Right? And that makes him the best race car driver there is, right? Did you get to the NFL by thinking you're second best?
Nah.
You got to the NFL by saying, I got to catch more balls, I got to do more reps, I got to be better, I got to be the best, I got to be first in everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what got you that far.
Yeah.
So it is a helpful mentality. In psychology, we would call that unhelpful, but it is 60, 80, 90% of the time helpful. But 10% of the time, right, when there's a stressful situation, like the French guy who comes, Sacha Baron Cohen is now is his competition, right? And all of a sudden, that all or nothing thinking comes back to haunt him, right? And in psychology terms, he has a panic attack, or he thinks he's on fire, but he's not.
Yeah.
I'll call that a panic attack in psychology terms, right? He thinks he's dying. That's a panic attack.
Right.
And then he develops neurological symptoms. He thinks he's paralyzed, right? We call that a conversion disorder, right? Or functional neurological disorder, right? He can't move. And he has to go through exposure therapy and drive with fear again when he has the lion in the car.
I'm gonna watch
right?
that movie,
And
this is what you get when you watch it with a psychologist.
right? And then you see scenes in the movie about how he interacts with his family, and you realize, his dad kind of like formed his mentality this way, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, he drives with me on the car. No one of his other sponsors, because he's found intrinsic motivation to do his sport.
Yeah.
Right. So I use that analogy because
Perfect analogy.
it's exactly what you just talked about, Daniel. It's the mentality that gets you to be the best. At some point, has to be slightly modified to realize that this is actually now holding me back from becoming the best. And that's very hard to do on your own.
Yeah.
It's very hard to do on your own, which is why people like me have a job, is to try to help that process on.
Yeah.
So actually, one of the things I usually tell all my patients if they want is to go home and watch that movie. With that in mind, like, what scene sounds familiar to you? Like, one night I came back and was like, the dad, he was talking to his kids like that. Like, my dad used to be like that. Like, if you're not first, you're last.
Yeah.
Right. And the funny thing is, at the end, his dad says, you could be second. It doesn't matter. Like, I was high when I said that. Like, right. It just doesn't even matter. Right. So you can still be great. But so it's about molding that masculinity that I can kick ass and take names and be the best. Right. Taking that's an asset that gets you to be the best player you can be.
Right.
And then increasing as we get older, that awareness of like, all right, when is that actually holding me back?
Right.
And that's tough. It's hard to do.
That's very difficult.
That's something I struggle with every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you noticed a culture shift since 2013 to now? I know Calvin Ridley was a Falcons receiver that actually came out and said, hey, I'm going to just step away because I need to just worry about my mental health. And the Falcons supported him, which is, awesome.
Yeah.
So have you noticed that, like talking to some of the guys and stuff like that?
I have. I noticed a big culture shift. A lot of athletes are starting to be more vulnerable with their mental health.
Yeah.
I think it's good because like I said, I know what I was like when I was going through it. And some guys you don't know. Like I said, sometimes you don't know when you're going through it.
Right.
So I think the more, like you said, the more masculine guys start being vulnerable and upfront with their mental health, the better.
Right. Yeah. I got to wonder regarding, NFL players are particularly at risk. Would you say so for mental health issues?
It makes sense that in any profession where it's dog eat dog, livelihood's on the line, your physical health is on the line, right? And
manlyhood.
Your manlyhood is on the line.
That's a good point.
Right?
And it's not on the line,
Your
man,
health.
but it's on display for everyone
Yeah.
to see.
Yep. Yeah.
Right?
It's a make or break world, and it's like I said, like I'm not surprised that you have social anxiety after the guy in the airport is calling you out on social media. Like that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It's not like, obviously I'm a psychologist, so I'm here to normalize things. That's my job. But it is normal for like that pressure to get to some of us, right? And I would imagine that number's largely greater than that. And even if it's not to the spectrum of major depressive disorder, because you fit all these boxes, right? You check these boxes, but our manual that gives us our disorders is all normal things. And then we make a criteria up that says if you have 6 of them, it's abnormal, right? Or if it infects your life, it's abnormal. But you can still have 3, right? And not be living fulfilled life, right? Even if you don't check all the boxes. So I think in those high stress professions, it's inevitable that those experiences are going to be there. And I'm glad to see that, like, even conversations like this, like 10 years ago, what maybe podcasts weren't a thing, but like, right, it might not have these conversations. And so I think anything that, ex-players like yourself can do to like advance these conversations so that people do feel, our psychology world is like, if we can affect one person, like we're like a teacher in a classroom, and you know that like 80% of them are really care, and then there's like 15% that really don't care, and there's like 5 that really like what the teacher's saying. Like if we can get to that 5%, right, then we're really helping at least a good amount of people.
Yeah. What about what are some things that you did? I know we kind of alluded to it last time, but what are some things that you did that you found that actually helped your mental health struggle and some of these issues?
I would say, like I said, the first one was therapy. Got a therapist. Just getting back on my routine. Just getting back to the things that I enjoy doing. Yeah. Working out.
Exercising. A routine of or exercise.
Yeah, just getting back on the schedule.
Yeah.
I'm an athlete, so just getting back on a certain schedule.
Yeah.
So that was good for me, just to get back in routine, have something to look forward to.
Yeah. I'm only asking you because I wanted to hone in on that exercise thing because, and I don't know what your experience is, but exercise has been shown to have pretty significant effects on mental health.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So from a prophylactic perspective, which means a preventive perspective, aerobic exercise has been shown to significantly reduce the development of depression in people like down the line. It's also been shown to cause neuroplasticity, which it means certain connections in the brain actually increase with, exercising every day and getting into a routine like you. And then also it's been shown to increase, serotonin levels and some of these levels that might be unbalanced in, depression or something like that, right?
When I was going through my depression, I just remember how out of shape I was and how I felt about myself and how my body looked. Yeah. I just remember I forget the months, like December, November, like going through COVID last year, I was just out of shape. I was just not feeling myself. So that's when I really started honing in on my fitness and get back to the shape that I was in when I played football, So now I'm at the like one of the best, probably the best I've ever felt.
Nice, man.
For sure.
So if the Lions call you back.
I'll be ready for sure. I'll be ready.
Rounders.
Physically, I will be. I don't know about mentally.
Yeah, you're ready to go.
Physically, I'm ready.
Dr. Polster needs to run.
Yeah, I'll say one quick thing about exercise, though. I think you mentioned it about the routine. You're a football player, you're on a routine, right? And so I think a lot of professional athletes are similar to the military personnel, where their days are structured. Yeah. Right? Like at UCLA, right? Like we had to call the athletic trainer to be like, when can this guy come in to see us in the clinic, right? Because they're so structured. And then all of a sudden you don't have that. Yeah. So for your entire life, up until 25, 26, 28, 30, whenever it is some guys 22, 23, right? And then all of a sudden, like, it's cut loose. And you're like, hey, by the way, you've never been taught how to structure your life or work out on your own. Good luck.
That's real.
Right? So it's a process to relearn that. Yeah. And what depression can do, which I call depression, it's sort of like you're on a plane and depression hijacks the plane. In the beginning, you're in the front seat. And you're like, and you can see the cloud, like the bright sky out there, and like starting to turn to the dark clouds, and you're like, well, it's probably gonna turn around. We'll be all right, right? And then you don't exercise for a few days, and you don't see your friends, and you don't do this, right? Next thing you know, you kind of move a few seats back in the plane, and now you're in the dark clouds, and depression is driving the plane faster, and it's like going over the speaker, and it's like, we will be at our destination soon. Don't worry, everything's fine. You don't need to do anything. And you're like, all right, I guess this will pass, right?
Exactly.
And next thing you know, months later, you're like the far back of the plane. You can't see sunshine anymore, and you know how to get to the front of the plane. But depression goes, I got this.
Yeah.
I'm driving the plane. You just sit in the back.
Yeah.
And that's what it does. It takes that motivation. It takes that energy level, and it doses you with fatigue and lethargy and just misery.
And so thoughts about yourself.
And so you just go like, I guess I'm just not going to exercise today. Then that's fine. And you feel worse. Right, because now you know you didn't do a thing that could have helped you get to the front of the plane again and take back charge. So now it's like a double dagger.
Yeah.
Right, you're already in the back of the plane, which makes you feel like crap, and then you know you didn't try to get to the front, which makes you feel even worse. Right, so that's why depression is so challenging to treat. And we usually start by, instead of trying to get from the back of the plane to the front, we go from the last row to the second to last row.
Yeah.
Right? You just get your gym clothes on. Right. Do 10 push-ups and then
get you walking.
Then
get
walking.
you out the bed.
Exactly.
So one interesting thing that I just remembered that I maybe wanted you to hit if you have time, the loss of not social identity, but your the loss of your identity for athletes that leave the sport, right? Either leave it how he did or just generally, right? Because your identity is so entrenched in the sport, right? Especially these professional athletes, they've been playing it for, since they were kids, right? And then now all of a sudden, they're not playing that sport anymore. Their social structure just dissolves around them potentially, right? Their routine, right, which contributes to that probably, is gone.
I'll tee this up for you guys, and then I got to go.
All right,
Brandon, I'd like you to share it with how you've kind of evaluated this. But I had this Megan Kins, her name, went to grad school with her. She's out in Pennsylvania, I think. She told me that she does this exercise with athletes that I've used too. I have a whiteboard in clinic, and I say, all right, let's draw a big circle, NFL athlete. Right, or just athlete, maybe not even NFL, just athlete. That's who you are, right? Well, let's draw like 4 or 5 more circles on this board. What else are you? Right, when you're playing one sport and you reach that highest level, right, it really becomes to define you almost by default. Like you don't necessarily even try to do that, and all of a sudden, like when it's taken away, it's like, oh my God, I'm nothing, right? Who am I? But there's other circles in there. They may not be that big right now. Right? But then that's where we need to start to flex our muscles in. We need to start to enhance the size of those circles to figure out, am I a friend? Right? Might not be an athlete, but am I a fitness enthusiast? Right? Right? Where can I flex that athlete muscle somewhere else? Right? Am I a boyfriend? Right? Am I a mentor? Right? Who else am I? And that, again, helps us move up the seats in the plane.
It does.
Right? It helps to start to fill us up again.
Give you a purpose.
Exactly. And that purpose is oftentimes in that process. When you try to figure out who else you are, it helps to start with, who were you as a football player? Like besides just like, the 6'6" guy with good hands, like what made you a good football player? Were you competitive? Were you a studious person? Like, did you like to really study the game? Like, why did you play football? Like what made you so jacked up to play? And then how can we look for other environments where we could employ those values, those things that we really enjoy? And then start to, again, move up the seats on the plane, right? And then find our purpose, and then start driving it again, take back control. So I'll let you guys talk about that.
That's a great way to just leave.
Get out
of here.
I'm out.
Thank you.
You're dropping the mic.
Appreciate it. Yeah, dropping the headphones.
Appreciate it.
Bye, guys.
Dr. Doug Polster, ladies and gentlemen.